Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge is a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services with a primary marketing focus on the Port of Anchorage, providing their customers with quality-based service specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberly Hoeppner, and today is July 22nd, 2014. When we're not here on air, you can always go check out our information by going to www.arh.noaa.gov or simply type in weather.gov and navigate to the destination of your choice. You can also reach us by our 1-800 line by dialing 1-800-472-0391. And as always, we're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. If you go onto YouTube, just type in Alaska Weather and navigate to the emblem for AK Weather. Now, going on to the topics of the day, the hot topic, fire weather. We have a high fire danger across the eastern part of the Brooks Range with a small area of extreme danger as they've been dry the last few days, and winds help to dry them out a little bit further today. Also, there's an area across the Kenai where there's high fire danger. So if you're in these areas, please make sure to put anything that you have burning, make sure it goes out before you leave it unattended. Now looking at your satellites to see what's going on across the North Pacific and the Western Bering and heading towards the east. Well, the thing to note on the satellite is this feature that wraps around a high pressure that's moving up from the Northern Pacific. The moisture that we've watched stream up the last week is kind of cutting off, and this high pressure is going to be the dominant driver of the weather coming towards the southwest. Now, a low pressure system is sitting up to the north in the Arctic area, and that's going to be pushing some cold fronts as we head towards the middle of the week. Well, putting this in motion one more time, you can watch that moisture flow on into the Bering area and pushing slowly towards the east. Looking at the satellites closer to home, here's the cold front that's draped across the northeastern areas back towards the Kuskokwim Delta and into the eastern parts of the Bering. Some low clouds have moved into the Alaska Peninsula. They were very warm yesterday, had some high points there along the Cold Bay area, but today the clouds have moved in, and you can see those are starting to push further towards the east. Now across the southeastern areas of the state, they had a trough that passed and now is further to the southeast, but still streaming some clouds in that area as this rotates along the backside of the low pressure system that's now situated just south of that area. So partly cloudy skies mainly there today, a small break in the clouds only existing across the northern panhandle at this point, and a little bit of clearing across the south central areas. Now as we go and look at your weather in more depth today, we had one trough that was pushing off from a low pressure system that moved in a cold front through yesterday. So we're going to see multiple cold fronts over the as we head in towards the mid part of the week coming from the northwestern areas. So here's the clearing across the eastern part of the Gulf areas. Fairly nice day across the southeast and all across the northern and western Gulf before this area of moisture pushed up through. Now across the central areas and back towards the southwest, we have this cold front that is moving very slowly towards the east. Some light showers were occurring across the northwestern coast behind the frontal area where the main rain band was developing. And across the Bering, we saw some light shower activity as the front just kind of is weaker at this end. Now here's the high pressure bringing the lower clouds across the western part of the Bering. And your forecast for tonight, we're not going to see that ridge move any further into the Bering just yet, as low pressure is going to continue to push and have a force across the western areas of the state. Still expect some patchy fog across the Bering and across the northwest, some patchy fog and some light rain. This front will start to pick up some momentum and push a little bit further towards the east, encroaching towards the south central area and the western part of the Gulf by the early morning hours. Now, the eastern part of the Gulf of Alaska may see some patchy fog develop, especially along that northern panhandle during the overnight hours. Otherwise, mostly clear with a few showers developing along the southern channels and just a little bit further inland overnight, as that weak trough still is in that general vicinity. Looking at your forecast for tomorrow, possible showers as a weak upper wave moves aloft, and then we'll see some shower activity increasing across the south central areas as that front goes ahead and pushes through into the Gulf of Alaska. And that's what this area is here. It's just a trough, and it's kind of dissipating as it moves through the Gulf of Alaska. Now, another front will be moving in the area on Wednesday, and that'll bring another swath of rain that'll pass through the already wet north and central areas of the state. Expect another half an inch to an inch of rain to fall across the Brooks Range and just south of that area. And so you'll want to keep an eye on any streams or rivers that might be affected in your areas. Now, across the eastern part of the Bering, look for some patchy fog and some light rain to continue. No real issues. We do have some winds picking up, primarily around 20 to 30 knots across, or 20 to 30 miles per hour across the northern parts of the Bering. The weather pattern across the central part of the Bering will be this ridge that's beginning to build in across and through your Wednesday. And then by Thursday, this ridge is going to be a 1032 high and really going to start taking control over the Bering. So warmer than normal temperatures out across that area. However, there still will be low clouds socked in all across the Bering and much of the Aleutians. Now, on Thursday, like I said, the front that was draped across the northwest is going to be sent through the southern areas of the state, keeping rain across the entire state, and then weakening. This front will weaken as it drops towards the Gulf, and then showers will become more scattered in nature. A low pressure system from the previous day on Wednesday, like I said, multiple fronts are going to be coming through. So this low pressure is going to push in towards the southeastern areas, and the southeast will see the most amount of rain on Thursday as this low pressure moves through. Now, the northwestern coast, not much change here, as they will have a stationary boundary that wraps across the Brooks Range. Patchy fog along the northwestern coastal areas, and a little bit of a gustier wind pattern behind this low pressure system that's pushing into the Gulf of Alaska, and then this ridge building in behind it that'll keep the gradients tighter a little bit through the Alaska Peninsula and possibly the eastern Aleutians. A warmer air mass is going to be moving into the northern Bering, so this warm front's not going to generate a lot of rain during the Thursday forecast for anywhere along the western coastal areas, but just we'll want to watch this system as there's a lot of moisture that's moving around the upper ridge that is streaming the moisture down through the eastern parts of the Bering. Now, looking at your temperatures for today, it warmed up quite a bit across the south central areas and all along the Gulf waters. We saw temperatures reaching up to 77 degrees at Eagle this afternoon, and across the southeast they were able to reach up into the mid-60s in areas where they broke out of the clouds. Now, back towards the northern Gulf Coast, they even saw temperatures reaching up into the lower 70s during the afternoon hours. Now, the temperatures across the central interior parts of the state was a moderation with the clouds across here, and that was in the mid-50s, right above the warmest temperatures where they saw some breaks in the clouds. And then across the Arctic coast, they saw temperatures mainly in the lower 40s, but they were still in the upper 30s. Near Barrow, they got up to 37 degrees today was their high. Across the western coast, we had high temperatures in the mid to upper 50s. And then looking at Alaska Peninsula, the same as well, mid-50s to lower 60s, and then 50s all across the Bering and Aleutians. Your temperatures for tonight will be a range of the freezing temperatures along the north coast, and then as you get towards the northern Gulf, really a very similar range between upper 40s to lower 50s across the area, and including the Bering will be up in the upper 40s. And Across the southeast, expect temperatures to be near 50. As we head into your forecast tomorrow, one more day across the eastern areas of the state, reaching back up into the mid-70s possibly, and the southeast will climb again once into the lower 60s, possibly upper 50s where they see a little bit more cloud cover. Now, looking at the Gulf waters, they'll see temperatures in the low to mid-60s, possibly along the northern Gulf reaching into the near 70s as well. The coastal areas will see temperatures in the mid-40s along the Beaufort Sea coast and back towards the northwest in the lower 50s. Across the southwestern parts of the state with clouds staying across the area and rain, expect temperatures to be in the mid-50s. And across the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutian Chain also in the mid-50s. Your flying weather for tomorrow is going to be all MVFR across the north and western areas of the state down through the Alaska Peninsula, and IFR conditions as well across the frontal areas as that next front comes moving through during the day, and IFR across much of the Bering with the low clouds staying in across those areas. Now, in more detail, your passes, Anaktuvik Pass will be IFR, and Adigan will be IFR through the day. And then Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will be both MVFR. And then Rainy Pass will be MVFR. Windy Pass will also be VFR. Isabel Pass will be VFR. And Mentasta Pass will be VFR as well. Tanita Pass VFR. And Portage VFR. So one more nice day for all these passes, Chilkoot and White Pass VFR. Here's your freezing levels, a little bit changed from yesterday, warmer at the surface, 4,000 to 8,000 feet all across the state, which actually is a bit cooler as you head towards the south. And then across the Bering, 10,000 to 14,000 feet where that ridge is pushing in from the west. Looking at your icing for tomorrow will be across the areas where the fronts are moving through from 4,000 feet at the northern coast and above 10,000 feet as you head towards the Bering. Now looking at your upper level flow, the jet stream is going to have a ridge over the Bering and low pressure situated over the northern Gulf. So more of a southwesterly flow across the southeastern parts of the state. And this is going to be driving the low pressure systems towards the southern part of the state through midweek. And then we'll see another change in the jet stream by the time we get to Wednesday. So very active pattern as we go through midweek. Now we have this low pressure at the 9,000 foot level, so primarily a southwesterly flow across much of the state, including the southeastern areas. And then across the Bering, more of a zonal or westerly flow, or a little slightly to the northwest as you head towards the Alaska Peninsula. Now again, at the 3,000 foot level, you have this trough here that's moving a southwesterly flow across the southeastern areas of the state, across the Gulf, a little bit of a change of direction there, and a westerly to northwesterly flow all across the Bering, and a change of direction around the low pressure system across the northwestern areas of the state. Now looking at your turbulence for tomorrow, you have below 10,000 feet primarily across the Bering Strait, including the northern part of the Seward Peninsula. All right, in just a moment, we'll be back with your marine forecast.
Convective activity is popping up, or maybe there's ice in the clouds, or low ceilings. Can you get through it safely, or should you be on the ground waiting out the weather? As an instrument-rated pilot, these are questions you've got to be able to answer. What about flying the route VFR? Does that seem out of the question on a day like today? With isolated cells developing, the see and avoid method of making sure you don't collide with a thunderstorm can work out. And it's perfectly legal, especially if, as an instrument pilot, you're prepared to get an IFR clearance if conditions require it. But filing IFR for an altitude that will keep you out of most of the clouds is even better. Now, with a forecast like this, some pilots would have scrubbed the mission before planning ever got this far. Making that call is part of what being PIC is all about. Make sure you know what's waiting at the other end of the flight, too. Review approaches before you leave the ground so you know what to expect. A 600-foot ceiling can be a piece of cake if there's an ILS, but a non-precision approach may result in a miss.
Okay, I filed via Martinsburg, then Victor 501 Phillipsburg, and Victor 265 Bradford Direct. So if we leave within the hour, we should be able to stay ahead of the weather. Or we can always deviate to the east if the weather develops sooner than forecast.
They have an ILS to runway 32 with minimums of 250 and half mile. And a VOR to 14, and that's 401 mile.
Yeah, so either way, we'll get a crosswind.
Yeah, that's the story of my life. Well, let's see. Cleveland Center handles the approach. You know, it looks like the airway is pretty much in alignment with the final approach course, so they should be able to give us a straight in.
Yeah, and if we're working weather, there's a DME arc to final there.
Uh-huh.
Being able to talk things over before the flight is one of the advantages of having a co-pilot. Discuss what-ifs and plan for ways to get out. It's a lot easier to think about it on the ground, and having determined your options makes you feel more comfortable in the air. Updating the plan in the air will help to keep you in the comfort zone. Even if you're flying alone, try to have this same kind of dialogue with yourself. Ask yourself why you selected a route or altitude or alternate. Where will you go if you have to divert only midway into your flight? One word of caution. If you're carrying passengers, it's best not to go through this dialogue out loud. They usually don't like the idea of flying with pilots who talk to themselves. It goes without saying, you need to know how to operate the avionics and other instrumentation you'll depend on during the flight. Yet if you fly IFR and don't know the capabilities and limitations of the air traffic control system, you're flying with instruments and equipment you don't know how to use. We'll highlight these capabilities and limitations during this flight. It's about 180 nautical from Dulles to Bradford by the route that they're plotting. A lot can happen in 180 miles, especially this time of the year.
Let's check for some alternates just in case.
Right, with good instrument approaches.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's see. We've got Dubois, about 40 nautical south. It's got an ILS.
Mm-hmm.
Although with that weather to the west, we may need something more easterly. Oh, well, there's always University Park.
Ah, yes, your old alma mater, as I recall.
Roar, Lions, roar. And even further east, there's Williamsport.
Yeah, well, it looks like we're about ready to go then.
Almost. Now, what about weather updates along the route? Don't forget Bradford's non-towered.
Right, they have an ASOS.
Mm-hmm. And Cleveland Center controls their airspace, which means their radar may not show the nasty stuff we're trying to avoid.
You're right. We should plan on getting an update with Flight Watch before the descent. I'd say just after we switch to Cleveland Center, northwest of Phillipsburg.
Mm-hmm.
Not many pilots pay attention to these little blue zipper lines that zigzag across charts. They show which center controls the airspace. And not many pilots can tell you where an approach facility's radar coverage ends and a center's begins. What does it matter whose airspace you're flying in? When you're concerned about weather, it can make a big difference because of the capabilities and limitations of different ATC facilities, as we'll see. Is it approach control radar? Center? Is it an area of fringe coverage? Or practically right under a radome? All of that can matter when you're looking for precipitation.
Okay, I'll just check in with the office and then give flight service another call.
I'm going to supervise the fueling. I'll see you out there.
Okay.
We're going to follow their flight and see how they utilize the resources in the cockpit and here on the ground to deal with the weather.
Great. Thanks. See you next time. Hey, what's the word?
Okay, the forecast for Bradford's still calling for 5 miles in haze and a 30% probability of 600 feet and 1 mile visibility in thunderstorms for our arrival time.
The en route forecast still the same?
Yeah, unstable air is the main factor. Getting some radar echoes just east of Cleveland and also some near Youngstown.
Okay, well, we're going to definitely want to check in for weather updates along the way then. Now, you sure you're comfortable going in this stuff?
Oh, sure. We'll get some help from the ground, and if we don't like it, we can always turn around or divert.
Okay, well, let's get going, because the longer we wait, the higher the tops get.
Their Beach Debonair is equipped with basic IFR equipment. No storm avoidance gear. The fact is, the only electronic radar or storm avoidance equipment most GA pilots have is right here on the ground, ATC. And it has some definite limitations.
Clear, prop!
The stakes are high. From 1982 to 1993, adverse weather was involved in over 1/4 of all aviation accidents. The pilots were responsible for 94% of those accidents. These aren't the kind of mishaps people walk away from either. If you discount wind accidents, about 75% of weather-related accidents involve fatalities, and most occur from March through September. Here are some other facts about weather accidents to keep in mind. 60% of weather accidents involve pilots with less than 1,000 hours. And if you think an IFR ticket makes you invulnerable, 43% of the pilots in weather accidents had them. Of course, not all weather-related accidents involve IMC. High winds cause lots of bent metal, so does carburetor ice. But here's one final fact for VFR and IFR pilots alike to keep in mind. The #1 cause of all weather-related fatal accidents results from pilots' attempted or continued VFR flight into instrument meteorological conditions, and 27% are IFR rated.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I think you're going to find that the marine weather for all areas is going to be the best yet for your Wednesday forecast. Now Wednesday we're looking at primarily a southerly flow across the southeast with a bit of a northwesterly flow. This southerly flow becoming more northwest towards the Dixon entrance. Now the winds on Wednesday will be between 10 and 20 knots. The highest winds are going to be near the Yakutat area, and then the seas across the inner channels will be between 2 and 3 feet, and across the outer waters expect 5 feet on your Wednesday. On Thursday, expect a southerly wind across the entire area, around 10 to 15 knots, all across the inner and outer waters, and seas across the inner channels will be between 2 and 3 feet, and the outer waters will see between 5 and 6 feet. Now looking across your northern and western Gulf waters, we're going to see a change of direction of wind from the southeast and easterly direction for the Prince William Sound, and then back towards the west as you get towards the western Gulf, and that's all going to be between 15 and 20 knots. Now across the Cook Inlet, expect a southerly flow for the most part, variable as you go towards the northern inlet area, all at 10 knots, including the Barren Islands, and a south to southwesterly flow through the Shelikof Strait. Seas across the Gulf waters will be between 6 and 7 feet, across the Shelikof Strait and Barren Islands between 3 and 4 feet, and 2 to 3 feet across the Cook Inlet, 4 feet over the Prince William Sound. A little bit quieter day on Thursday is planned for you. Prince William Sound will be 10 knots out of the east with seas 2 feet. Across the western Gulf waters, a variable wind with southeast in the northern Gulf, and towards Kodiak Island, we'll see a northwesterly flow. And then we'll see Shelikof Strait, we'll see 15 knot winds out of the southwest, variable winds across the Barren Islands, 10 knots, and southerly flow, 15 knots across the inlet. Now looking at your seas across Prince William Sound will be 2 feet, and then the Gulf waters we'll be seeing between 5 and 6 feet mainly, and then 3 to 4 feet across the inlet, and 3 feet for the Shelikof Strait and the Barren Islands. Looking at Alaska Peninsula, a westerly flow for tomorrow, all at 20 knots under a small craft, and 6 foot to 7 foot seas, highest seas across the northern Pacific. Now looking at Thursday forecast, change of direction in your wind is going to be 15 to 20 knots out of the west to northwest, and seas will be between 5 and 6 feet. For your Aleutians, expect a westerly flow at 15 to 20 knots, and seas will be between 4 and 5 feet with a little slightly higher sea towards the eastern part of the Aleutians at 6 feet. Heading into your Wednesday forecast, primarily a northwesterly flow with a more southwesterly flow towards Shemya. And now the seas will be between 4 and 6 feet all across the area, except slightly less seas over just south of the central Aleutians at 3 feet. Looking at your your western coastal areas, we'll have small crafts just across the northern Bering at 25 knots, and it's all mainly going to be from the westerly direction, and seas this day will be between 5 and 7 feet, highest seas towards the northern Bering. Now your Thursday forecast, a north to northwesterly flow becoming more west towards St. Matthew Island. Seas will be between 5 and 6 feet. And your north coastal areas will see a southeasterly flow across the Chukchi Sea becoming more southerly across Kotzebue Sound. Across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, expect easterly flow and at 15 knots. Now little bit stronger winds towards Kotzebue, and seas therefore will be between 4 and 5 feet across Chukchi and Kotzebue Sound, and to then 10 feet, and then ice covered still across the northern coastal areas till you get to about the Prudhoe Bay or just east of there. Some open water in that area will have seas around 3 feet. Thursday, your forecast is showing mostly a northwesterly flow with northerly flow across the Beaufort Sea coast. Seas this day will be between 4 and 6 feet, 3 feet as you round towards the Beaufort Sea coast. Now, just to review your forecast for tonight, we have this low pressure system across the northwestern areas of the state that's going to help to push these fronts on through towards the south central and the western part of the Gulf. So expect rain activity to continue across the northeastern coast back towards the Kuskokwim Delta. So some light scattered shower activity might occur across areas of the southeast, but mainly dry conditions as ridging is still in control here. Patchy fog might develop across the northeastern part of the Gulf, and patchy fog will be along across the northwest as well. The Bristol Bay area should see some fog pushing in the overnight hours, some isolated shower activity out that way, and then ridging staying in control through the bearing into your Wednesday forecast, and in matter of fact building by midweek. Another frontal system will be pushed by the one that goes through tonight and work its way through the southeast, and across the southeast they'll see a short break in the shower activity, but this will be ended quickly as the next wave will be on its way. Stationary boundary will stay draped across the northern areas, so expect rain to continue. Make sure you stay up to date on your streams and rivers, as there might be some issues with river rises. As we head into your Thursday forecast, expect things to begin to taper off across the mainland, but continuing across the southeast. Well, it's been a pleasure being with you tonight. Hope to see you back tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.